Let's call this meeting to order. It's Assembly Ethics and Elections, sort of a special meeting here today on February 2nd at 2:30 in room 240. So let's start out with an attendance here and introductions. We'll start out with Mr. Training.
Dick Training.
Barbara Jones.
Dee Gates.
Amy Stromeyer.
Eric Crow.
And I'm Chair Pete Peterson. And we'll go straight to new business, Title 28 Vote by Mail Amendments.
So I wanted to talk to you about this amendment number 2, and I guess we've got number 2 here and it says number 1 up there, so we probably need to fix that before Tuesday night. And so this,
13th of this Tuesday.
oh really, I get an extra break.
extra
That
week.
is so cool. I didn't know that.
Whatever.
So, this amendment is a little bit different than what we talked to you about at the last meeting. We had asked you not to make us mail to LMs. And Eric, you are looking on the right page. In number C, it says, I'm not required to mail to any voter that doesn't have a valid residence address or is a PN or undeliverable. So purge notice, obviously they're inactive. They're not quite inactive, but they're gonna be off the voter register. So we don't want to mail to
If the state
them.
ever takes them off.
Yeah, they haven't voted for more than 8 years or haven't responded. So those ones we'd like to take off. Undeliverable, we're obviously saving money. We've taken LM. I told you before that we wanted to not mail to LM, but 2 things have happened. And one is that the LMs, we have done a whole bunch of return mail processing with the state, and I think we've eliminated about 10,000 of those LMs because they're undeliverable. So now there's probably about 10,000 left, and we met with the state, so I wanted to tell you, after meeting with the state, we've learned that there's information that there's probably good reason to mail ballots to those other 10,000 people. We don't have the tools to evaluate which of the LMs we should mail to and which we shouldn't. So we'd like to err on the side of caution and mail to all of them. I think that the state is working on the process and that eventually it's going to be updated fairly soon, but right now it is not in a condition that we think we should not mail to them. So we would like to mail to the LMs. That's different than what I told you at the work session.
What did you learn about the state, from the state about the LMs? Remain. Can you tell us? If you can.
I don't think I can tell you.
You can't legally tell us, or
I think it was disclosed to me.
Confidential conversation?
Right. I think it is. It involves election technology and security, and so I think I probably can't disclose the technology issues. So,
Mr. Chairman, I guess if she had information that she couldn't disclose that would mean she didn't want to send to people, I would want to go into executive session to figure out why. If she has information that is difficult to disclose and it leads her to conclude that she's sending more out, then I'm willing to just go with that.
I would be happy to go into executive session if you want.
People
Okay.
get nervous about executive session,
Okay.
particularly on elections, so if you want to mail to 10,000 more, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Pete, I agree with him. She's going to send more out. She's going to reduce them now. I'd be worried about that. But she's going to say another 10,000 sending out. That's no big deal. She's already bought the envelope. You bought a $1.7 million envelope?
well, we'll
Your
eventually
mouse.
use them.
$1.7 million.
So we got a good discount for buying that many, I assume.
She bought out Staples.
Oh,
Store's gone now.
So there's one other tiny change in this, and so that's that I'm asking you not to require me to mail to voters that don't have a valid residence address. And on the purpose of this, I'm talking to you a little bit about that. And I've worked with Dean quite a bit on this, so Dean knows what we're talking about. At the very top, it says we have about 1,500 voters. I think it was actually about 1,330 voters that don't have a valid residence address. Instead of having 2100 Douglas, they have Lot 6, Block 5. Someone told us that they do that on purpose so that they don't get mail. But either way, it's not a valid residence address. So when we put that in, our GIS system cannot assign a ballot to that address. And we fixed a whole bunch of them, but we're down to just this handful. I think we're up to 7,000, and now we're down to 1,300. We sent them all a letter today to tell them that there's a problem with their residence address, and we're asking them to update it with the state, and that if they can't update it with the state, they can just come and get a ballot at the one of the accessible vote centers. But we can't figure out which ballot it is. And one of the things that Dean asked me to add to this floor amendment was that the last second to the last sentence and the last sentence, because there's like 167 or 168 different ballot styles, if a voter receives the wrong ballot, it could result in skewing the election.
I mean, the road service area can do exactly that. Because sometimes there's very few people that vote.
Mm-hmm. In Girdwood, that race was decided by 2 votes. So that's the other thing that we're asking, if we can not, if you could amend this so we can mail to those 1,500 voters.
Okay.
Any
Any discussion about?
I was a community councilman last night. One of the guys there said his son has lived out of state 15 years. He still gets stuff from the state. That he's going to just want to vote this time. 15 years, they've not purged him yet. I'd like to know when the state's going to get around to doing it.
So I would
It's
make a suggestion, and that's that he should take his son's anything he gets from the state and say return to sender. He should tell him to return it to the state, because if the mail is returned, then that allows the state to put them in undeliverable or purge notice. But if the mail just keeps going out as if the voter is still at that address, the state can't purge them.
From my community council, yes.
Anybody that you don't send to can vote a question ballot, and we can fight it out.
Then you go to one of the centers she's got. You got 4 of them now?
That's kind
I
of
was the
like
right
3
number,
to
okay?
6.
I have 5.
5, okay.
You can have one.
Yes, we're going to have 5. So yes,
They get a ballot?
So we're bumping up from 4 to 5?
yes we are.
Oh.
Okay, hold on, we're not there yet. And on D,
Yes, that was for you.
yeah, and I appreciate it. It had, and I don't want to add it to this election. Obviously, I think you've got enough to deal with. We can deal with it in a subsequent election. We are probably going to have to deal with the lack of postmark, and therefore some change to,
When did we receive it?
yeah.
I agree with you.
And I think if we did that, it would be a we'll count ballots for X number of days after the polls close. Some approximation of what, after a 1 or 2 vote by mails, we can say, we got within 3 days everything we counted. Like, after 3 days, we started getting ones that were not postmarked by the day out that we rejected, but 95% of them came in within 3 days. And that might justify we will count for 3 days after mailed ballots, not people walking in, count for a certain number of days. But otherwise, how do we do that if we ever go to a form of return postage that is not stamped? It's not.
I think we wanted to put this in so that, the door is open and then we get to have this discussion. And I think we go back and then we just comb through the code and we just make sure we've got all the places that we need it corrected. And I think there are lots of options. You could do it that way. You could say everything is received by 8 p.m. That's what other jurisdictions do that have paid postage.
If you're going to mail, you better mail early, kind of.
Right, because it has to be received. Everything has to be received. So
It has to be received by election day or midnight on election night?
it's election day by 8 o'clock p.m. Everything has to be received. Because there's no postmark on the business reply now.
So what about absentee voters? I mean, some people are not going to change their address because they're just going to Arizona for 3 or 4 months in the winter, but they still may want to vote, so they're actually still applying for an absentee ballot, not a vote by mail ballot, correct?
Well, they kind of are the same. But so what it is you apply to vote, have your ballot mailed to a temporary address, which it's still absentee. It's an absentee form. So you fill out the application. We're trying to tell people to get them in by March 1st, and then they'll get mailed from the mailing house on March 13th to the temporary address. But they have to apply and sign and give us an identifier, and that's a security measure. I don't want Dick calling and saying to mail my ballot to his house. So that's why you still have to apply.
But I'd vote for her.
Yeah. I guess there's nothing incompatible about saying, here's a business reply, it has no postmark, so you got all kinds of options. Delivered by hand, use the return receipt with enough time that it's going to make it there, put your own damn stamp on it if you think it's really important to you so it gets a stamp. So it really doesn't limit their options so much as you just have to have enough awareness that, hey, if you use the business return and it's the day before, you're running a risk.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you, but you're running a risk.
Or they can vote early, too.
Right.
Dick?
How many drop boxes do you have?
12.
And where are they at exactly? Are we going to publicize where they're at? Are we?
Yes, we are.
Because I've
So,
been asked by community councils where the drop boxes are.
so we've got these materials for you. So here's a new flyer, how do you return your ballot? And here's the list of Dropbox locations, so you can pass that out. But this one is even better.
Ah, map.
Shows you where they're at.
Isn't that cool? And we overlaid the bus routes over them.
Good.
Ah, wow.
Good. You brought me enough for my briefing I'm going to give on Sunday.
Okay.
We should have
Yeah, we were getting a presentation at the Scenic Foothills Community Council last night.
Yes, I think Carolyn was there, is that
Yes,
right?
she was.
Good.
I'll need Karen at the Tudor Area Community Council on the Wednesday of next month. Yesterday next month. They'd like her to speak at 7
Okay.
o'clock.
Just remind me of that date. So, Eric, I think part of what we're going to do, and Dean actually suggested that we make this the topic of the meeting for the Ethics and Elections Committee meeting in June. And as long as it's before June 25th, I'll be there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can start this discussion on the return postage. And because it'll probably take us a while to figure that out. And then, but I think that would be a good way to start it. And one of the things, I think I will keep track of those statistics that you're talking about. I hadn't thought about that before. But I think that'll be really helpful for that discussion. And then we'll definitely keep track of the returns by Dropbox and
What's your
mail.
guess on that? What's the Las Vegas line, over under on the percentage that will be Dropbox?
Over 50%.
I think over 60.
All right.
Some people don't trust the post office.
Is it
That's
Copy?
good.
Well, I think it could actually go up even higher once people get used to knowing where the drop boxes are and get used to voting by mail.
Well, I'm telling you, we're never changing that for city elections. Because we're getting used to this, and the state's going to do the exact opposite of the primary and the general.
So the question last night was, well, why don't we just go vote by computer? That was one of the questions that came from the community council last night. And I said, well, the state is the one that controls, your PFD application and your ID and all that. So that isn't within the community's purview. So the state would have to make some changes to allow that to happen.
It does seem like we're boldly adopting technologies that were around in the 18th century for voting, and not exactly earth-shaking. And Benjamin Franklin did our post office, so it's not.
But it is going to be, for many people, Eric, is going to be shattering. They're not, we can't do precinct voting anymore? What's wrong with this?
I walked by the original post office when I was in Philadelphia one time. There was a sign there saying, this was the very first post office.
Yeah. So not to diminish what you're doing, but it is kind of an old
The
technology.
most favored indentured, the most notable indentured servant was Benjamin Franklin. He left his uncle that he worked for him, ran away.
We've had a couple of cybersecurity discussions, and the one place, the cybersecurity person, when he did our evaluation, he said, if you get an audit, and there's different types of audits, of election systems, he said they will criticize you for allowing email voting. So computer voting has changed a lot since the 2016 election, and now all of the computer voting prints ballots. So there's really no computer voting anymore. It's still, you can vote on a terminal, but it prints out your ballot, so it's not much different than filling it out.
So it prints it out and you still have to send it in?
Well, some of those ones are at a location,
Oh, okay.
but you're not voting electronically and transmitting your ballot. It's considered to be the most insecure system, and it is not recommended.
Makes sense.
Do you have a set response to criticism of having the signature on the outside? Do you
Yes.
have candor?
Well, I'm not sure that it's canned. So we need the signature to verify the voter's identity. People do complain about it being in the post office system or in public, and so we encourage them to use the drop boxes or take it to an accessible vote center. And most of them are pretty satisfied with that. They weren't aware of the drop boxes or the accessible vote center option. We did do some research right at the very beginning to see if it was a violation of any confidentiality to have the signature on the outside. And it isn't a violation of state law. It's not confidential. But our answer is the drop boxes are only open by election officials. They've taken an oath. They've sworn to keep information confidential, and most people are okay with that.
We also had a question last night about older voters whose hands may not be as steady as they used to be, and so they were worried that the signatures would come out not like their original signature, but obviously we've got it set up so someone else can sign below them on
Well,
right?
no, that is only if you can't sign.
Sign.
So if you have to make a mark, you have to have a witness. But we captured signatures from the last 3 municipal elections and the state's general election in November, and they had a 66% turnout. So, and the state obviously has gathered signatures from other sources as well. So if you're, you know, if I registered to vote 20 years ago and my signature has changed, the signatures that we have on file are just the last 4 years. So that's probably good that we've got current signatures that we're comparing to. We're still asking people to use their official signature instead of their car's grocery store signature. So that is, I think, going to be the bigger issue.
Anything else on amendments or prepaid mail? Or
Not really.
Well, Mr. Chair, I know you have asked me in the past to issue an opinion on whether employers or unions or nonprofits could provide postage stamps and vote by mail election coming up. And I would expect this meeting is scheduled pretty recently, but I hope to finish it before the next meeting. I don't have it finished, but I pretty much have a preliminary opinion on it, and I have mentioned it to the municipal attorney. So it's coming. I could describe, I guess, the substance of it if you wanted, but maybe you prefer to wait for the written opinion.
well, you know, it could be a couple more weeks before our next ethics and election meeting, so maybe you could fill us in on where we are right now.
Could you say that again, please?
I'm so sorry. I was like making sure it was on the agenda.
All right, and this is preliminary, so subject to municipal attorney review and from a written draft. But basically, it seems like election law has changed. We had a 1990, I think it's a 96 case against Roe v. Domer, and after that case, the state changed the statute that's applicable to providing things like transportation to vote, or care for a child or dependent, so someone can go and vote. And the change was to make that statute more like federal law, which is pretty much an absolute prohibition on providing anything to a voter and to help them vote, except for these specific enumerated exceptions. And stamps are not there, so as odd as it seems, something as cheap as postage stamp is prohibited because there's an absolute prohibition. So I think that would be a costly felony if someone were to do so. And that seems absurd, but I think that's what the law says and legislative history indicates. And so I say it's an absurd result, which is why municipal attorneys will use reimpeachment.
So if that's the case, we're probably going to have to let some groups out there know.
We're going to let the unions and the political parties know that.
And the candidates.
So, and the candidates, so they're not gearing up to send postage stamps out now, and that could get a whole flood of campaign violations coming in.
The potential campaign violations. Interesting. Well,
I would not recommend getting the word out right now. I think within a week you'll have a final official opinion on that question.
all right. Sounds great. Well, when you get that finished, go ahead and send an email out to the committee members and fill us in so we know where we're at.
And we may want to do a press release from the committee about that.
Excellent idea.
Okay.
Yeah, anytime between now and the election that we do a press release, it's just one more thing to get the word out about vote by mail. So, good idea.
Without a stamp.
Without a stamp. Any other discussion?
I just wanted, you all know that Suzanne has an amendment to about, it's under section 3, she's amending the prohibition where it says a person may not, file to run simultaneously as mayor and school board. And, last year we had a candidate who did that. And we asked the candidate to withdraw. I told the candidate I couldn't prohibit him from filing for both offices. It's on page 3.
I see.
And so, no, it wasn't. It
Was
was
Dustin?
And so Suzanne is amending this because she thought it was confusing, and I do kind of agree with her. It says a person may not serve or file to run simultaneously. She just put it at the bottom. It just says you can't file for 2 offices, for mayor or school board.
Who was it that tried to?
David Meeks.
Actually, he's this time running for the school board, but he hasn't defined what seat he's running for yet.
What?
I'm pretty sure.
What?
What did he file for?
Mayor and a school board seat.
David Neese? I just talked to him. So he's done that?
Yeah, I can double check if you'd like.
Because he said he hadn't even defined what seat he's running for yet.
I believe it's
Selection?
CP, but I can go and verify right
So
now.
let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is retroactive.
I see that.
You get that look in your eye.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. I'm not sure whether we want to apply it retroactively or use it as the poster child of why we did this.
I think is why we did this. I wouldn't go make it retroactive.
That creates a whole
It
bunch
gives
of
him a
problems.
lawsuit area to hang his hat on.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I think this brings up the problem and why we proposed in the future this solution.
I agree with you. I don't want to give him a chance.
So we should change that so it's not retroactive?
It doesn't matter. We just don't have to enforce it, I think, right?
Dean?
Without provision prohibiting the dual running, I didn't think about that
Okay.
question actually. But you could make the ordinance right now, we have it as retroactive.
Can't
You
wait
could
that
make
long.
that like retroactive, excuse me, retroactive except for that section if you wanted to do that. Because I guess that would affect someone who's already taken selection in the current code.
I'll run that amendment if you want.
Well,
I'll explain it.
So is he running for 2 offices to make the point that we, that it's...
You're asking us to explain his...
I don't know, I'm just, I mean, it's hard to figure out what motivates people sometimes, so it was just a question in my mind that there was no answer for.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, so.
Yeah, I think that's better.
Yeah.
Show me the exact spot again.
It's on page 3 of 16.
So prohibitions?
Right.
I thought it was Dustin and it was on his knees.
And so we always knew a person couldn't serve in both jobs, and so it really never mattered, you know, if an assembly member was at the end of a term, their term they would just resign from their seat and then serve as mayor. That's never been a problem. But this would be a problem because someone's going to get elected for, if they get elected for school board and elected for mayor, they have to resign from one seat. And then we have to have a special election.
So
Yeah.
that costs us more money.
Yes.
Of
So,
course, I can serve and file simultaneously if you mean I'm on the assembly and I'm running for mayor.
that's why Suzanne did an amendment, because she thought this was unclear. Her amendment is much clearer.
Pulls that out and says a person may not file and repeats all the language. I think that's why.
Yeah.
Okay. In case you
I
want to
have
run for
Suzanne's
mayor.
language if you wanted to read it.
Oh,
Eric's doing a good job. I'm not surprised.
So is Ethan.
Sorry. Ethan's doing a good job. Next time.
All right.
I can't believe you screwed this again.
Identified in this section. That's what you wrote?
Yeah.
That helps.
It's Suzanne's intent.
did you want to see that?
So you'll run an amendment that makes everything retroactive except that prohibition.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I
I
wasn't
can do
focused.
that.
Not really needs it.
It should be
Ron
part of
Stafford.
this. We want to do another
Ron
amendment.
Stafford.
Up for you.
I think
Squeeze
these
and
are
solve that.
explain.
Okay, sure.
It's still the
Yes,
same
and
problem.
no?
It's not David Meeks, it's Ron Stafford.
No. It doesn't
No,
matter.
him with the same problem, your gross good is. Not trying to go gadfly that David Neese is.
And David was at the Scenic Foothills Community Council last night. I know that he doesn't live in that area, so even though I was gone for 2 weeks, as soon as I saw him there, I said, I wonder what he's running for this year.
He's gonna run for the school board.
School board.
CE, yeah.
Anything else we need to talk in additional detail about changes?
So, nothing else about the AO that I have.
Okay? And so, what else have you got?
What else do you have?
Vote by mail update.
Oh,
So here
fantastic.
are the new, these are the instructions that are going to be going in the ballot packages. And the most exciting thing about the instructions is on the second page, in the middle, our 5th accessible vote center at O'Malley's on the Green.
Wow, you can vote and tee off on the same time?
In the
So,
wintertime?
so we did get an inquiry, and somebody commented about the accessible vote centers just being concentrated in this part of town, and that there was no accessible vote center, I mean, south of the library.
That's a good point.
You know, obviously there's one in Eagle River. And so it has limited hours because we don't know how busy it'll be. The golf course has issues, you know, they don't have staff there until 9 o'clock. So I said we'd open at 10. So 10 in the morning.
Good.
Well, if there ends up being a runoff, if the golf course may be open.
Maybe.
Especially if we have an early spring.
I told Mr. Croft I would be an API if there's a runoff.
We do have workman's comp, they'll cover that, right?
So I have a couple of other things that I'd like to update you on. At your last meeting, I think, Eric, you asked us to do an open house for candidates to tell them about vote by mail. And we didn't do an open house, we just couldn't pull it off. But we did put bags together like this. So all of the candidates, when they come in to file for office, either at the clerk's office or at the Accessible Vote Center, get a bag with a bunch of vote by mail information.
Good.
So we were really happy about that.
And so, Butterfingers is vote by mail.
So at the
But it's bright color.
at the AEDC luncheon, we had, don't let this opportunity slip through your
Fingers,
fingers.
no.
Oh, yes.
So
You're smart, Barbara.
There's no pun beneath you.
I don't even claim it. I have a great team that really put that together. And so the other thing that you asked us was to contact public affairs on the base.
Yeah.
And
Should
Carolyn
do
has
that.
done that. And we've also talked to Amy Strohmeyer. She has offered to do some outreach for us on the base, so we're working on that. We talked about ASD, and we have a meeting with the ASD, I believe, a week from Friday, so it's the 9th. And we have 2 requests for ASD. One is, and we hinted to it, we've told them that our research shows that we need to get flyers out to every student at ASD. Our research is showing that that's one of the ways to reach transient families and people of different socioeconomic status and in part of our community of color. So we really want ASD to be supportive of that.
How's the superintendent doing? Is she coming back to you? And
Yeah, we have, the meeting is all set up. So that's one of the things that we're doing with ASD. And then we also have to ask them if we can put those posters up in the old polling locations, because there's 122 precincts and they're all going to have a sign up, but 80 of those precincts were schools. So we need their permission to put the signs up.
Right.
And then the other thing that I thought I'd let you know is that we've done some volunteer recruiting. And that's working out really good. And so volunteers are contacting us, and they're going to go out and hang those posters. So I think that's, and we're vetting them. They're not just, someone asked me if we would do community work service, and I said no. I feel a little uncomfortable about having community work service hang our posters.
Unsupervised, right.
You know, they're moderately supervised, but I just don't think that's the professionalism, that the image that we want to get across. So anyway, we're looking for volunteers, and it's working well. Amy also volunteered. She's going to work election night. She's going to be one of our drop.
Which Amy?
This Amy. Oh, that Amy.
I'm sorry, there's Amy's everywhere.
That Amy's going to be managing all of the accessible vote centers. You know, she's handling the drop boxes. She's going to be busy. This Amy is going to be one of our volunteers.
Amy's that year.
So she has to come to training, and she has to participate in emptying a drop box in the month before the election. And then on election night, she gets teamed up with someone else, and then the two of them go out and close a drop box. So we need 24 people on election night. We don't want to hire 24 people to just work for a couple of hours. So we've got a lot of people like Amy who want to volunteer and want to help, and it'll be fun.
Amy Strohmeyer, did you really volunteer?
Yes, I did.
So those are some of the exciting things that are happening. I think I shot you all an email about all the things that are going on. I did buy 1.7 million envelopes, which was really difficult. And I had a little printout, and I'm sorry, I will go get that after we're done here. But it's, you know, I need to talk about our budget and money. A lot of our things are coming in way over budget. And right now, so O'Malley's on the green. I needed more computers. I just placed an order of $12,000 for more computers. We don't have enough electrical outlets, so I had to place an order that was $1,500 for new electrical outlets. And Carolyn and I were leaving the Accessible Vote Center one night, and I fumbled my keys, and she had to get her phone out to shine a light on the door. It's so dark down there, and we did get a complaint during the mock election, so we're adding a light, an exterior light to the building. And so, unfortunately, these expenses, I had no idea I had to order envelopes for a runoff election now. So I ordered envelopes, you know, there's 3 types of envelopes. So I ordered all of those for the regular election. I had to order all of them for the runoff because they can't get printed in time.
Right.
So now the other issue that I have is I am a little bit worried about the accessible vote centers. You know, we're sending ballots to all about, it's going to be probably 210,000 people or more, but I want to staff the accessible vote centers and have lots of ballots there. I'm thinking, you know, maybe in the range of 50,000 blank ballots, because
Each center?
no,
10,000
the
each,
whole,
or whatever.
right, because if you think about it, I'm concerned that I think we're getting the word out. I think lots of people are going to vote in this first vote by mail election. I think the issues on the ballot are compelling. I think we're going to have high turnout. And so if I don't, and this is the hard part, I have to buy the ballot stock now so it can be delivered by March 2nd.
Right.
If I wait, the vendor can't get it to me in time. So right now, I am erring on the side of trying to make this work. but Rose has indicated to me that I am probably going to be about $500,000 over my budget. Over the let me put it differently.
Election budget.
Over the projected 1.3 million that you gave to me. You gave me about 1.37 million. And then I still have 800,000 in my operating account. So it's 1.3 and 8. And we don't know how this is going to fall out. And I do have a little bit of money because we haven't filled Amanda's position, so we're going to have that money. But, and Rose does not recommend a first quarter budget amendment. She is making a recommendation that we just wait and see how this all falls out and then talk about it then. But I wanted to let you know that this has just occurred to me in the last couple of weeks, that this, I feel like I am just going right and left, spending a large amounts of money. You know, when I ordered these envelopes, that I said, we need to talk. And I need your counsel. You know, one of the things that we were talking about was we don't have a backup plan at the accessible vote centers. And at one time we talked about buying generators, and I just decided, no, I'm not going to go that far. If we lose power, we'll extend voting for a day or something. But so I'm trying to be somewhat conservative, and I don't think that if you've been at the election center that you can see that we're extravagant on any equipment, but we're just trying to make sure that what we do works.
All right. Did you have a question?
Just let us know how we can help you, Barbara. We knew this was going to happen going into this, but there's a lot of unexpected things that are going to crop up. So let us know what type of support we can be to you.
Well,
Because the main thing is we want this to work. We're not going back to precinct voting. So these are not lost causes. These are lost causes. These are things you're going to keep using.
Right, that is true. Almost outside of the printing and mailing, that is the expense that I don't think we quite understood or quite budgeted correctly for. The printing and mailing is much more expensive than what we had anticipated.
And so the extra envelopes that you ordered, we're going to be using the same envelope style. So if we're not using these, we can store them at the vote center for the next election in April of the next year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it might not necessarily be, I mean, we're not going
It's
to
not
waste
second
those
cost.
envelopes. Those aren't going to be something we have to haul to the landfill. That's something that we can use the approximate year.
We'll have security envelopes, outer envelopes. Those we can definitely use over. If we switch to the return mail, then we'll have some that we won't be able to use. But at the accessible vote centers, we always use the return envelopes. And so even if we get a different return envelope, the ones that we've got, we can use at the accessible vote centers for as long as we want.
So we won't end up wasting
Yes, so
those.
we won't end up wasting them.
Well, one of the questions last night at the Scenic Foothills was how much additional it was going to cost, because they thought we were going to have to hire a lot more people to run the vote by mail election than the normal election. So they said, well, how many people do we normally hire, and how are we planning to hire this year? Well, when Carolyn told them that we normally needed over 600 people to do the poll-based elections, and then we were going to hire around 60 for this, there were big eyes. People were really surprised that we were going to be able to get by with around 10% as many employees doing the work versus the poll-based election.
Right.
So I think some people are anticipating that it's going to cost more.
Right, and I think that what's going to happen is we don't know how that's going to shake out. So that's why Rose is suggesting that we wait. You know, we had the budget was for around maybe 160,000 for workers, and obviously it's going to be less than that, but we don't know where it's going to. The current workers, they make $12 an hour. These workers make $9.50 or $10. So we're paying them a little bit more, but we need a lot less. So I think there are going to be some little savings in places like that.
Good. All right.
So could I ask for some direction? And the direction that I would like is, you know, I am going over budget, and I am very uncomfortable with that. And I would like your, you know, authorization, your support for going forward and purchasing what we need to make the election work.
Well, we're committed at this point. I don't believe that we should be trying to skimp by on this first election, because this is really, really important to make it work well the first time out. You know, because if the voters start losing confidence in our election system, you know, it spirals downhill quickly. So, Mr. Trainey.
We already made the decision when we decided to go with this. We're going to fully support what Barbara's doing.
You bet.
And I'm sorry you're uncomfortable doing this, but you have to keep buying the equipment to make this election work correctly. We're never going backwards. And so we'll give you whatever type of support you need from us. We'll take the blame. If it goes over, fine, I can deal with that. What I
Okay.
can't take the blame for is we have a failure in this election. It's got to go forward to be done successfully.
Spend what you have to. Don't what you don't. But if it needs to be done, we got to do it.
Now that 24-karat computer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And anything else about keeping the election center secure? Are we all set up and ready to go? And as far as that is concerned,
We are. We've had a couple of tiny audits, and I will talk to you about that in executive session. There are just a couple of small things that we need to do to make sure that we're secure, and we're ready to go. Amy's got locks on all of the cages. You know, everything is, the building is, you know, locked down. We have a little sweep that we do every night to make sure that everything is locked up and secured. We have limited access into the, you know, the office and the vault. You know, limited access on some of the computers. We're pretty good. We have one small thing that we need to do after our cybersecurity audit from MOAIT, and we're working on that.
so you're creating standard operating procedures for security so that everyone is going to know what to expect when they're working around the vote center.
Right, so that is, we have a little flyer that says employee expectations, and it says, you know, look for the lanyard. And if you see someone in your space that doesn't have the right color lanyard, you need to ask them to leave. It says safety and security is everyone's business. It doesn't mean report it to me. It means tell them or ask them why you are in this space. You are not authorized to be here. So that's really important that everyone is empowered to do that. The election workers have lockers in the break room. They're not allowed to have, you know, purses, cell phones, or anything on the floor. So they have to lock their stuff in the lockers. People that come in, sign in, they're told they can't take pictures with cell phones. You know, so we're pretty good in the cybersecurity. We've had 2 cybersecurity reviews, and we have 2 things that we need to do to get up to speed.
So people coming in to watch the vote counting are not going to be allowed to start taking pictures with their cell phone?
They are not.
Good.
They're supposed to sign in and say, you know, cell phone photos are not allowed.
Well, the cell phone should be turned off.
Right.
Do we require that?
I don't think I can require that. I think that we will have a security guard there. We're paying for a security guard the week before, and then the 2 days, the day before and the day of the election. And, the press has a different colored lanyard, and they sign a confidentiality agreement, and they know not to publish confidential information. So I think we're in pretty good shape as far as cybersecurity. The one thing I probably told you before is that the cybersecurity guy told us the threat is real, and you have to be prepared for the threat, and then you have to have a plan if you do get hacked. And so that is something that we're still working on. We want to make sure that we do have an emergency operations plan. It's called the worst case scenario, but we need to update that if there's been a computer hack, and that's one thing that we still haven't done.
Did you get a sergeant at arms or somebody there to be the security point during the election to make sure everything's done the way you want it to be done? Sort of like a Bonnie Jack, to irritate people, but to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Bonnie Jack will be there. I thought that was me.
Well, no, I want Bonnie Jack there. You're too kind.
Bonnie Jack will be there. Carol Thompson from the state will be there. We have a really good crew of team leads that'll be there to make sure that things happen the way they're supposed to.
You're way too kind, my dear. Bonnie Jack, she doesn't matter who she offends. She'll call him to task. I want to make sure she's there.
She will be there.
Okay. You guys don't know who Bonnie Jack is? I'll relay it.
I owned Bonnie Jack for decades.
Bonnie,
You know what I mean.
Bonnie is the team lead for the envelope separation and ballot, or envelope opening and ballot separation area. So
So there's going to be there'll be one security guard,
yes,
and is he going to be armed?
I believe that the contract for the MOA is the guards are armed.
We changed that years ago, yes. The guards for
Yeah.
MOA are armed.
Okay.
And Amy Solberg actually has a training set up for us on March 9th. We have active shooter training for all of the election workers. And they're all taking cybersecurity training as well, online cybersecurity
We have
training.
water, we have fire hydrants, water sprinklers to make sure there's no fire or anything. They've got water there.
Yes.
Okay.
And the cages have a roof on them.
Each
so
cage
that-
has its own roof. Okay, good.
Yeah. That probably guess is better than razor wire at the top. Well, we're coming near the end of our time here. Any other comments, questions by members of the committee? Any questions or comments from the audience?
Well, I'll just throw in one other thing. If you can believe this, the data download from the state comes on Monday. So we download the data on Monday. We start cleaning it on Tuesday, running it through the GIS process. And the ballot styles will be assigned on Wednesday. And the data goes to our other vendors and our print vendor on, I believe, Friday or the following Monday. So everything is going to be, out of our hands in like a week or so.
Good luck.
Pretty amazing. Yeah, thank you.
We'll have to get you some therapy with some deal with.
All right, well, if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn this meeting.